The network, gives you a list of who they think should play which part. They have actors with good TV cues. Do you remember that term?
Yeah.
Yes.
The cast of Barney Miller looked like a happy family on screen, but off camera, their lives told a completely different story. One actor fought a deadly disease in complete secrecy while still filming. Another survived a childhood trauma that would have broken most people. And one star's personal relationships included a shocking tragedy that made headlines across the country. After the show ended, some cast members disappeared entirely, while others reinvented themselves in ways that stunned Hollywood. The real story of what happened to them is nothing like what you'd expect. Hal Linden. Hal Linden carried a life that never moved in a straight line. It always shifted, always tested him, and somehow kept pushing him toward something bigger. He was best known as Captain Barney Miller, but long before he ever stepped into that calm but sharp role, he spent almost 10 years standing in the shadows on Broadway. He worked as an understudy, hoping each night that maybe this would be the one when someone called in sick, and he finally got his moment. Most nights, nothing happened. Still, he showed up. He kept learning. He kept waiting, even while money at home stayed tight, and the pressure of raising 4 children grew heavier with each passing year. Then, 1971 arrived, and everything changed. He stepped into the role of Mayor Rothschild in The Rothschilds, and gave a performance that cracked open his whole career. He won a Tony Award that year, and it felt like the world had finally turned toward him. He later said that this period was both painful and shaping, because it forced him to grow while he kept walking the thin line between almost making it and almost losing everything. But he held on, and when 1975 came, something new began to take shape around him. Barney Miller was not an easy rise. Far from it. The first pilot failed so badly that the show almost died before it even started. Linden's agent had to fight for a clause that freed him from Broadway so he could even take the TV role. Without that clause, he would have missed the chance completely. Once the show started filming, the pressure grew. The schedule was brutal. Some episodes stretched into 20-hour days, stacked with rewrites, arguments, and scenes that got changed minutes before cameras rolled. Everyone felt the strain, but Linden stayed steady. He even turned down a role that would have paid him more than everything he earned across his entire Barney Miller run. He chose loyalty instead of the big check. He believed the show mattered, and he refused to walk away. When Barney Miller ended, he did not slow down. He shifted into hosting 2 educational television series and won 2 daytime Emmys for them. He kept acting too, slipping into guest roles on The Golden Girls, Will and Grace, and stages across Broadway. He stayed busy, always moving toward the next thing even when the spotlight dimmed for a while. Every stretch of his life carried a kind of quiet resilience that kept him upright. Away from the sets, he gave just as much of himself. Since 1997, he has served as the spokesman for the Jewish National Fund. He stayed involved, stayed public, stayed committed to the causes that shaped him. His life after Barney Miller held both heavy moments and hopeful ones. Personal losses, new projects, old memories coming back to the surface as he looked over the 6 decades he has spent performing, fighting, learning, and rising again.
Just like old times.
As soon as you give some information to Sergeant Wojciechowicz, you can make some phone calls.
Max Gail stepped into the spotlight as Detective Stan Wojo on Barney Miller, and very quickly became a face people trusted. The show ran from 1975 to 1982, and for a while it felt like he lived inside that tiny precinct. Viewers loved him. The industry noticed him too. He earned 2 Primetime Emmy nominations back-to-back for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. And that kind of recognition told everyone that he was not just another sitcom actor. He had timing, heart, and a warm kind of charm that stayed with people long after the episode ended. But while his career floated upward, his personal life took a sudden, painful turn that changed him forever. In 1983, he married Willie Beer, and for 3 short years they built a life together. Then, in 1986, everything collapsed when she passed away from colon cancer. Max was left with their daughter, India, and a grief that did not fade quietly. So he walked away from Hollywood for a while. He cooked for her. He read bedtime stories. He tried to rebuild a world that had broken in half. And through that loss, he began to search for answers anywhere he could find them. That search pulled him into a different path. In 1988, he narrated a documentary called Hoxie When Healing Becomes a Crime. It questioned mainstream cancer treatments and explored alternative medicine. Many people called the film controversial, but for Max, it came from a real place. It came from the wish that someone like Willie could have had more time. It came from the feeling of running out of options too soon. Even with that shift in his focus, he never completely left storytelling. He had already directed several episodes of Barney Miller, showing that he understood how a scene moved from every angle, and that talent followed him into the years ahead. Later in life, when many actors slow down, Max found a whole new lane. In 2018, he joined General Hospital as Mike Corbin, and something about the role fit him perfectly. He brought a softness to the character and a painful honesty to the Alzheimer's storyline. People felt it. The Academy felt it. He won the Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in 2019 and again in 2021. Winning once is hard enough. Winning twice at that age is something only a few ever do. His character passed away on the show in 2020, yet Max did not disappear. He returned as a quiet presence, a ghost guiding his on-screen son through confusion and heartbreak. Fans loved those scenes because they carried a sense of calm and closure. Critics praised them too, saying his performance added weight to moments that could have felt simple. Even after that chapter ended, he kept moving. He showed up in Chicago Med. He stepped into Magnum PI. He kept proving that he could shift styles, shift tones, and still carry the same warmth that made people love him decades earlier.
But then I started to get more parts, and one of them was Barney Miller, so I did the pilot.
Ron Glass. Ron Glass carried a calm kind of charm that pulled people toward him without effort. People first felt it when he stepped into the role of Detective Ron Harris on Barney Miller. The show started in 1975 and kept its place on television until 1982. And during those years, his mix of cool intelligence and smooth confidence made him unforgettable. The show itself earned 2 Golden Globe Awards and 2 Emmy Awards, and in 1982 he earned his own Emmy nomination for Supporting Actor. It was the kind of moment that should have defined him completely. But his life kept opening into new places. Because once the cameras stopped rolling, he did something most people never knew. He poured his time into helping kids who had almost no chance. He became the chairman of the Al Wooten Jr. Heritage Center in Los Angeles. The center was created after a young man was killed in a gang initiation drive-by, and Ron stepped in quietly and stayed for years. He guided programs, raised support, and made sure kids who felt trapped saw a path toward something better. After the Rodney King verdict shook the city in the 1990s, he felt the pressure even more and worked harder. Many of the kids he helped ended up in college. Some even said they would never have made it without him. Still, he kept his life close and private. He grew up Catholic, but as time moved on, he found a different kind of peace in Buddhism. He joined Soka Gakkai International because he believed in its focus on education and culture, and the idea that peace could start with one person. He never married. He never tried to show the world what he was doing. He just lived in a quiet way that made sense to him. After Barney Miller ended, he kept moving from one role to another, always steady, always present. In 1982, he stepped into the shoes of Felix Unger for the reboot of The Odd Couple. Years later, he became Shepherd Book in Firefly. Fans loved him even more when he returned in Serenity in 2005. And in between all that, he appeared on shows like Murder, She Wrote, and Friends, and CSI. Every time he showed up on screen, he fit right in, as if he had been part of that world from the start. He kept working, he kept helping, and he kept giving people something warm without saying too much about it. When he passed away on November 25, 2016, people began to realize how much he had done behind the scenes. They saw the gentle way he had lived and the quiet power of someone who used his life to lift others.
You know, being true to their characters and trying to make sure that everything that was written was being flushed out totally. And
Abe Vigoda. Abe Vigoda spent his whole life surprising people. He was known everywhere as Detective Phil Fish from Barney Miller and as Sal Tessio from The Godfather. Yet somehow the strangest part of his career had nothing to do with acting. It was the fact that people kept thinking he had died even when he was completely alive. It started in 1982 when he was performing in a stage play in Canada. A magazine called People published a line that called him the late Abe Vigoda. One small mistake, but once it happened, it spread across the country like a joke no one wanted to stop telling. Soon, TV hosts were teasing him about it. Cast members played along. Even he leaned into it with a tired smile, once posing for a photo inside a coffin just to poke fun at the confusion. Later, he used that same photo in an ad to remind Hollywood he was still alive and still working. And whenever he visited late night with David Letterman, he would walk out, look at the crowd, and simply say he was alive. It got laughs, but underneath the joke, something heavier grew. Some casting directors actually believed the rumor. They skipped over him for roles because a magazine headline fooled them, and that hurt him more than he ever admitted. Behind the scenes, his time on Barney Miller brought another kind of trouble. When he left the show to star in his own spin-off, Fish, a quiet tension turned loud. Arguments over pay and billing spilled into the open. Producers even sued him when he did not show up for rehearsals, and the whole thing became news in entertainment trade magazines. He was talented, smart, and tough enough to fight for what he believed he was worth. But the stress of those battles sat on his shoulders for years. He still returned to Barney Miller for guest roles, trying to keep things steady. Yet he left again because the same disputes refused to disappear. Off camera, he lived nothing like Detective Fish. Fish dragged his feet and complained about everything while Abe Vigoda loved to move. He was a jogger and a handball player and often ran 5 miles before work. People who knew him smiled at the contrast. He looked tired on screen, but could outrun most of the cast in real life. When he finally passed away in January 2016 at age 94, the news almost felt unreal because the rumors had been floating around for so many years. He died peacefully in his sleep at his daughter's home just weeks before turning 95, and friends said he seemed healthy right up to his last breath.
There's a part in this new series called Detective Fish. He's a man who has tired feet.
Jack Sue's life moved through moments that looked impossible at first, but somehow pushed him forward. During World War II, he was sent to the Topaz War Relocation Center in Utah, one of more than 120,000 Japanese Americans forced out of their homes after Executive Order 9066 in 1942. It was a place where people felt forgotten. Families carried fear everywhere. Yet in the middle of that silence, he began to use his voice. He sang. He joked. He tried to make people laugh because he felt that if he could lift even one person's mood, the night might feel a little lighter. Soon, everyone knew him as the clown who kept spirits alive even while his own family faced prejudice, loss, and the weight of a country that treated them like outsiders. When the war ended, he walked back into the world with hope, but the world did not open easily for him. In the early 1950s, He worked in clubs like the Continental Grove and Chin's Golden Dragon restaurant in Cleveland. Night after night, he performed for crowds that loved him. But things changed when radio stations learned about his background. They pulled him off the air without a second thought. It was the kind of quiet discrimination that crushed many non-white entertainers of that era. He knew he had to choose between giving up or finding another way in. So he changed his name from Goro Suzuki to Jack Sue. He chose to pass as Chinese because he understood how Americans blurred Asian identities, and he needed every chance he could get. It was not a choice he made lightly. It was a survival move in a time that offered him very few. Step by step, the effort began to pay off. He landed a role in the Broadway version of Flower Drum Song and later appeared in the film. More doors opened after that. Finally, he became Detective Nick Yamana on Barney Miller, a character who did something rare. Yamana wasn't a stereotype. He wasn't a sidekick. He was an American police officer with humor, flaws, and depth. Jack made sure of that. He refused roles that made Asian Americans look small or foolish. Whenever someone tried to hand him something disrespectful, he turned it down, even if it meant losing work. He believed actors of every background should be able to play any part, and he lived that belief every day he stepped on a set.
Jack Sue was billed as the Chinese Bing Crosby. Jack was a singer. He did Flower Drum Song, the movie.
James Gregory. James Gregory's journey from Wall Street to Hollywood never moved in a straight line. It started in a room filled with numbers and noise where he worked as a stockbroker, but he hated every minute of it. One day, he simply told his boss what he really felt about the job and walked out. No plan, no safety net, just a feeling that life had to be bigger than this. Right after that bold exit, everything became uncertain. He took whatever work he could find: clerk jobs, counter jobs, small tasks that paid just enough to keep him going. But every night, he kept chasing the thing that pulled him forward. First small roles in stock theater, then slightly bigger ones. And after a while, Broadway started calling him in. He wasn't famous yet, but he was moving. Slowly, steadily, always forward. Then something shifted. In 1959, he landed the role of NYPD Detective Barney Ruditsky in The Lawless Years. The show ran from 1959 to 1961, and it changed everything for him. Producer Danny Arnold noticed him and kept his name in mind. Years later, when Arnold needed someone to play Deputy Inspector Frank Luger on Barney Miller, he remembered how Gregory carried himself. The voice, the presence, the stubborn charm. He said Gregory reminded him of the real Barney Ruditsky, the old New York rackets cop from Prohibition days. So he gave him the role. And once Gregory stepped into Luger's shoes, something clicked. The character was loud, emotional, sometimes annoying, sometimes sweet, and always unforgettable. Luger stayed on the show for 7 years and turned Gregory into a familiar face in homes across the country. People loved him for that mix of fire and warmth he brought to every scene. But his story kept moving. Even after television made him recognizable, he never slowed down. He kept taking roles and ended up appearing in more than 100 TV and movie projects. He played cops, senators, military men, and even villains. One of his most memorable turns was in The Manchurian Candidate in 1962, where he delivered a performance still talked about today. And whenever someone asked him if he worried about being typecast, he just shrugged. He said he would take anything that caught his interest, comedy or drama, big part or small. Then came another twist. In the late 1970s, he headed his own short series called Detective School. It didn't last long, but it was a fun idea. Gregory played a teacher showing regular people how to become private eyes. Housewives, salesmen, anyone curious enough to try. It was a light show, but it showed how comfortable he was blending humor with authority. By 1983, he decided to step away from acting. He had already built a life that crossed decades of American television and film. He proved that you can reinvent yourself more than once. You can leave Wall Street, stumble through odd jobs, fight for roles, grab the chances that appear, and still end up with a name people remember. Gregory Sierra. Gregory Sierra's career moved with a kind of energy that kept surprising people. It all started to shift in 1972 when he stepped into the world of Sanford and Son as Julio Fuentes. He played the Puerto Rican neighbor who had to face Fred Sanford's jokes again and again. Yet he did it with a spark that kept the character alive. He gave Julio dignity. He gave him humor. He made him feel real. And people noticed. Then, in 1975, things changed again when he joined Barney Miller as Detective Sergeant Chano Amengual. He brought pride to the role and a fire that made every scene feel sharp and alive. Even though he stayed for only 2 seasons, he left a mark that stayed with the show. Writers kept talking about his timing, his intensity, his softness when it mattered. He became one of those actors who stole scenes without trying. And he did not stop with sitcoms. He slipped into films too, one after another. Papillon in 1973, The Towering Inferno in 1974, and Beneath the Planet of the Apes in 1970. Each one showed a different side of him. He could do humor. He could do danger. He could play a man broken by the world, or a man standing tall because of it. He often chose roles that allowed him to show his Puerto Rican heritage with a kind of pride that was rare in Hollywood at that time. Those choices opened doors for others. Quietly at first. Then, slowly and steadily, they helped shape the path for Latino actors who came after him. Away from the spotlight, his life held a weight that many never saw. He was married 3 times, first to Eileen DeFelita from 1969 to 1972, then to Susan Pollack in 1976. She died by suicide in 1978, and that loss left a deep cut in him. Later, he found steadiness with his 3rd wife, Helen Tabor. But the shadows were always there. He had grown up with hardship of his own. His parents abandoned him when he was young, and an aunt raised him in a tough Irish neighborhood in New York. As a teenager, he drifted toward gang life. And then one day, he stepped into an acting class with a friend. He had not even planned to perform. Yet when he tried, something in him lit up. The teachers saw it. They accepted him on the spot. Soon, he was touring with the National Shakespeare Company and playing roles no one expected him to reach. Years later, he faced another battle: stomach and liver cancer. He lived with the illness for years before passing on January 4, 2021 at the age of 83. His ashes were given to his wife just as he wished. His story moved from pain to possibility again and again. Ron Carey had his own unexpected path. People mostly remember him as Officer Carl Levitt on Barney Miller. But when he first appeared in 1976, he was not even playing a cop. He showed up as a criminal called the Mole. He dug into banks. He popped out of floors. He even coughed dirt all over the detectives. People loved it. So the writers brought him back, not as the Mole, but as Levitt, the small and eager patrolman who always wanted a promotion. He stood just 5'4", and the jokes kept coming. But he played Levitt with a sweetness that made the character feel like the little guy everyone wanted to root for. And late in the series, he finally got that promotion. He walked in with loud sport jackets and annoyed the whole squad, and fans loved every second. But when the show ended in 1982, his career fell into the same kind of struggle that Levitt faced in The Precinct. He played a small role in Johnny Dangerously in 1984. Then came Johnny Garage, a sitcom that was canceled after only a few episodes. He kept working, though. He took a role as a priest in Have Faith in 1989. He made guest appearances on Midnight Caller and Lucky Luke. And whenever the work slowed, he went back to stand-up. He joked about his Italian-American family, about guilt, about being the shortest one in the room. He kept performing because he loved it. That was his anchor. His final years were quieter. He dealt with health problems and eventually died from a stroke in 2007 at the age of 71. He had been married for 38 years, but never had children. His last film was a short piece in 1999 called Food for Thought. Steve Landesberg. Steve Landesberg stepped into people's living rooms as Detective Arthur Dietrich, the calm and clever voice on Barney Miller. Yet off-screen, he was nothing like the man he played. The character spoke like a scholar and tossed out facts about science and economics with ease. But Landesberg once admitted in a 1979 Washington Post profile that he did not read much of that stuff. He said he tried to play Dietrich as a cop who happened to be smart and funny, not as some professor in uniform. And then comes the twist. The thing he truly knew inside out was hotel work. Before comedy, before TV, before fame, he worked as an assistant credit manager at different hotels, checking credit cards, spotting scam artists, and catching guests who tried to slip out without paying. He liked to say it was part clerk, part cop, part manager. That real job became his early police training long before he pretended to be one on television. And in a strange way, all those nights watching people lie and panic gave him a sense of human behavior he carried into his scenes. His path to Barney Miller was anything but typical. He started as a stand-up comic in New York, doing impressions and building his act one club at a time. Soon he was appearing on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, where he became a favorite. People laughed at his voice, his timing, his slow burn delivery. But something he refused to share was his age. He feared that if casting directors learned he was middle-aged and still not widely known, they would dismiss him. So he dodged the question every time. For years, he let people believe he was younger than he really was. Only later did fans discover he was already in his late 30s when he first stepped onto the Barney Miller set in 1975. And even though he later earned multiple Emmy nominations and kept working in films like Wild Hogs in 2007 and Forgetting Sarah Marshall in 2008, the shadow of Detective Dietrich followed him everywhere. Audiences loved him so much in that one role that they struggled to see him as anything else. Away from the spotlight, he lived a very private life. He did not talk much about his health. When cancer entered the picture, he kept almost all of it hidden. Even close fans had no idea anything was wrong until December 20th, 2010, when news broke that he had died at 65. People were shocked. Then tributes poured out. Stories surfaced about how much he had shaped comedy writers, young performers, and the tone of the series he helped define. And it became clear just how quietly he had balanced a long illness while still showing up, still performing, still making people laugh.